ESPN.com NFL Insider KC Joyner joins us here on the Sports Bash here on 97.3 ESPN to break down the Eagles game in NFL Week 16. And Casey, I know you usually hear glorious from Mike, but I'm not Mike. And my favorite wrestler, I don't really watch wrestling that much, but my favorite wrestler was Stone Cold because, well, he's anti-establishment. I'm a bit of a rebel. So, Casey, how you doing today?
Love the intro.
I know you'd appreciate it. Casey, how was your Christmas?
As long as you don't give me a Stone Cold Stunner, we're good.
No, I won't give you a stunner. Don't worry about it. So, Casey, this whole weekend, first of all, getting to the Eagles game, I wanted to ask you, I've asked people throughout the day, how did you feel about the whole breakdown of the two games Saturday, the 1 o'clock, 4 o'clock games on Sunday, and the two games on Monday? How did you feel about how the weekend was spread out?
I liked it in one sense. I think the NFL, everybody talks about the NFL's ratings being down for 100 different reasons. Just look at the matchups yesterday. Imagine if it's Pittsburgh and Houston, and you've got Deshaun Watson in Houston. Everybody's going to want to watch that, but you've got TJH and the back of a Heineke one in there. Yeah, that's not such a compelling matchup. Same with the night game. The Eagles are a compelling draw, but it's against a mediocre Raiders team. If Raiders were playing up to last year's talent level, that would have drawn huge ratings. So I like the spread out, but I just would like to see a healthier NFL so we can get better matchups.
Casey, looking at the Eagles game, the final score said 19-10, but it actually was more like a 13-10 because that last touchdown was kind of of no consequence. We saw three different versions of Nick Foles now. We've seen the guy who came in, got them out of L.A. with the win. We saw the guy who threw 4 touchdowns against the Giants. And we saw the offense struggle last night. Was the offensive issues a reflection of Nick Foles, or was that the overall game plan?
I'm thinking part of it was probably a little bit of both, but part of it was the game plan. I expected, because we talked last week about how the Raiders in their practices were said to be kind of sluggish. They weren't very motivated. This is a team that's just getting ready to end its season. It's got to fly across the country to play Philadelphia on Christmas night. So, there's 100 reasons why that team should be down on themselves. And the Eagles came out and they started running the ball. And the Raiders were saying, okay, we want the Foles to pass the ball. They were loading the box with an extra defender, and Philadelphia kept running the ball. Worked on that touchdown drive in the first quarter, but it wasn't working after that, and the Eagles kept doing that. And I think the Raiders sensed immediately, you guys don't trust Foles to win this game. And if that continues the rest of the season, continues during the playoffs, it'll be a very short playoff run for the Eagles.
Casey, you say they don't trust Nick Foles, but yet they didn't win the time possession battle. They basically were behind by 9 minutes to the Raiders. They didn't have the ball control that they've had most of the season. Most of the season, this team has been the better team at time of possession. So what was the reason for that yesterday?
38.5% good blocking rate is part of it. The Eagles have been over 40 most of the season, and a lot of tends to push towards 50. Good blocking rate is my metric that measures how often an offense gives its ball carriers quality run blocking. 41's the league average. So if you're below the league average, you're not having a good game, and they weren't getting big gainers either. They were getting just normal gains, and they ran a lot in that first drive. And again, as I think they sensed, okay, the Raiders are trying to stop the run. Now we're going to let Foles pass the ball. We're going to lean more on the passing game, but that's not the way you want to go in there. I think you send your quarterback the message. We're going to run the ball heavily, because usually teams like to pass to get the lead, then run the ball to win. The Eagles did the exact opposite. It just tells your quarterback, we don't trust you.
So what do they need to adjust? Because now, like I said, we've seen 3 different versions of Nick Foles in this offense. What do they have to adjust going into the playoffs? Because for all intents and purposes, the Cowboys game is an opportunity for a tune-up before the bye week heading into the postseason.
I would want my vertical passing game to do a lot better, because Foles did terrible in vertical passes. Those are passes to go 11 or more yards downfield in the air. He did terrible on that last week, and then yesterday he averaged fewer than he averaged 1.3 yards. 1.5 yards on his 10 vertical pass attempts, completes 1 of 10 vertical passes for 15 yards, 1.5 yards per attempt. That's just atrocious. Now, mind you, the Raiders didn't do much better, but you can't. If you can do well with that if you can hold the other team down in that sense, if you can get them to not pass very well, and the Raiders didn't pass well vertically either. But if you go into the playoffs and you're going against the Vikings, you're going against the Rams, against the Saints, against the Panthers, against the Falcons, even the Seahawks, all of whom can vertically pass very well when their offenses are playing right. If you can't pass any better than this, you're never going to win a game.
Casey, you mentioned the blocking on the offensive line. We saw the bad snaps from Jason Kelce. We saw that Chance Warmack struggled at times at the left guard. This offensive line has played a lot better with Wisniewski at left guard. So what has been the difference from what you saw last night and what you see most of the season from this offensive line?
From a pass blocker perspective, they actually didn't do that bad of a job. Last night they allowed pass rush pressure on 30% of plays, exactly 30% of dropbacks. That's league average is usually around that. It can vary from week to week. Like the average in week 16 was 27.8%, so it's a little bit worse than average there. But I think the problem is again when they get in the situations where you're trying to throw the football, when other teams know you have to throw the football, it's easier to generate a pass rush generally in those situations when the defense can just pin its ears back. So the Eagles needed to get situationally ahead, and they did early on. But I just think I still would have liked to see them come out, throw the ball vertical, go after that weak Oakland secondary, and get a lead, and then start running the ball from there and really dictate the pace. Because they kind of got ahead and could dictate the pace a bit in the first quarter, but generally speaking, for the rest of the game, they weren't able to dictate the pace, and that's just not where this offense needs to be.
Casey, switching over to the defense now, a big part of the problem for the defense, at least for the Eagles, is giving up the big play. Why are guys like Jalen Mills and Ronald Darby biting on those double moves again, considering they saw it last week against the Giants, and they happen to get bit once again against the Raiders? I mean, is it their footwork, or are they out of position? What's the problem there, and why are they biting on these double moves?
The whole idea behind the defense is aggression. It's their front seven is always aggressive, get upfield, beat your blocks. And so when you put that kind of mindset to your team, you're going to be aggressive. You're going to get guys trying to bite in the slant to go for a touchdown and things. The funny thing is, and that was a terrible play by Mills to jump on that slant and go, and it's he's been doing that a lot. But Derek Carr only tries 4 vertical passes yesterday. 4 vertical. That's just an incredibly low number. And the only completion he got was when Mills bit on the slant and go. That's the only completion he had on vertical passes. So the Raiders weren't going to be throwing vertical. And I think, in fact, the Raiders, if you look at them all season, they generally speaking haven't thrown vertical anywhere near as much as you'd think. So I think that's part of it too. And it's been this particular contest. So they figured, you guys aren't going vertical anyway, so I'm just going to go ahead and jump the route. But you got to be careful when you do that, because he didn't just get beat bad. He got torched for a touchdown. If you get beat on that play and it gets a 20-yard completion because the safety gets over, you can deal with that. You just can't give up 63 touchdowns.
Now, in reference to their rush defense last night, Marshawn Lynch, I know he sat out a year and he came back out of retirement. He's been one of the better running backs, but again, he really shouldn't be gashing the Eagles defense that badly. He was way over 100 yards last night. Is it more of a change in the game plan for the Eagles on defense, or do you think it might be wear and tear to actually give up that many rushing yards, considering they've been very stout against the run all season?
The Eagles last night had allowed a good blocking rate of 33.3%. So that's a really good number. That's in line with what they've been doing. The past 6 weeks, I think their good blocking rate have been 29.1. They've been right around, for the 6-week periods that I measure for my ESPN Insider articles, they've been right around 29-30% for, I think, 4 or 5 weeks for, I measure 6-week periods. So they stayed good in that category. The problem for them is they once again allowed a double-digit yardage total when in my good blocking yards per attempt category, meaning when the other team got good blocking, they were gaining a double-digit average on those runs. That's terrible. You want to be really around 6 to 7 yards. And the thing is, the Eagles had struggled very badly in that metric early in the season, and for a good 8-week period there, they were getting it in line, saying, okay, now we're holding teams to more along the 6, 7, 8 yard level on that metric. So now, yesterday, they reverted back to the 10-yard metric, and that's you can't be at that level, because that means that you're getting aggressive and you're stopping the run, but when you're not stopping the run, they're getting the big gainers. And you go into the playoffs and you're facing Latavius Murray, you're facing Todd Gurley, you're facing Kamara, you're facing Ingram, you're facing the Panthers running backs, you're facing the Falcons running backs, or even the Seahawks have a couple of potential game breakers if you give them good blocking. I don't think you can have that weakness going to the playoffs.
Now, they caused 5 turnovers last night, and that was a big reason why they were actually able to win the game last night. But is the biggest key to them causing turnovers from last night and also moving forward, is it their pass rush? I know they caused a couple fumbles, but they also, with the pass rush last night, caused Derek Carr to go into a lot of mistakes. Is the pass rush still the focal point of this defense? Because as you mentioned, they are a very aggressive defense, and that's the way Jim Schwartz wants them to play. But in order for them to keep causing turnovers, do you think the pass rush still has to be the focal point of the defense?
Carr only tries 4 vertical passes all game long, and usually vertical passes are where you're going to be able to get pass rush pressure, because the quarterback is in the pocket for a longer period of time and you can get in there. He only tries 4 vertical passes, and yet the Eagles generate pass rush pressure on 34.4% of dropbacks. It's the 9th best total in Week 16. which means that even when teams are throwing dink and dunk throws, you're still getting in there and getting pressure on the quarterback. That's a superb number. That's the one thing that, yeah, it is a lot of the. I know that they were doing a very good job of, one guy holding the ball carrier up, and then the other guy coming and stripping the ball away. They're doing a good job of that. You can't count on that every week, but if you get pass rushing, you get consistent pass rush, you can count on interceptions happening. So I think that's going to be the key if they're going to develop turnovers in the playoffs, is to keep that pass rush pressure going.
KC Joyner, ESPN.com, NFL Insider. You can follow him on Twitter at KC Joyner TFS. KC joins us every week before and after every Eagles game on the weekends. Of course, KC on a Tuesday today, because yesterday was Christmas, so we kind of had to shuffle the deck a little bit. Appreciate him coming on. KC, let's review the NFL Week 16 schedule as a whole. A lot of the games that happened this weekend affected playoff seeding and playoff potential. Let's start on Saturday. The Ravens win over the Colts. They're still alive. If the Ravens make the postseason, who could they threaten?
Everybody. Nobody in the AFC wants to face that defense right now, because it's the most opportunistic defense in the league. They're getting a lot of pass rush pressure. Their run blocking has improved tremendously. And if you look at their pass blocking over the past 6 weeks, it's really good, too. It's top 10 in the league. So you start looking at that going, all right, I know they don't have a lot of offensive weapons, but if you can run the ball and you can get an opportunistic defense and you get a quarterback who gets a lot of time in the pocket, that's a scary combination for anybody. So the AFC teams are hoping they don't make it.
Looking at the Vikings 16-0 win over the Packers, kind of two different stories going on here. One is the Vikings. Their offense didn't look too great, but that defense, what a great performance by them. And Harrison Smith showed the whole league why he should have been a Pro Bowler. Yeah,
he should be an all-pro. He's best safety in the league, arguably. The Vikings also, their offense has kind of taken a step back, but I think they started to decide we're going to play formula December and January defensive football. That's what they can do. So that's the thing about them, is they're scary because they can lean on the run if they want, but they also could go vertical if they needed to. So they're a team that doesn't have to play the kind of game they did, but that they can. It's a good sign for them.
The Packers were shut out twice this year. That's the first time since 2006. I know Rodgers isn't in the lineup, but there's something to be said for the fact that you can't even muster some field goals at home. Something's got to be going on here.
Yeah, their passing game is really. They used to be. It's a 2-year change for them, because they used to be we're going to power run, or go throw vertical and power run. That was their thing. Throw vertical early and then power run to win the game. And when their running game started to falter and the vertical game took a bit of a step back, they said we're going to start throwing the ball a lot more. They need to decide: do you want to be a dink and dunk offense like you have been the last year and change? It's worked, but it's really not what you guys do. Or do you want to go back to being that vertical and power rushing team? Because I think they need to go back to their earlier format. If they don't, even when Rodgers returns, this team's going to disappoint.
On Sunday, the Lions, they got eliminated from the playoffs against the Bengals. The Bengals looked like they had no life in them the week before against the Vikings. This week, the Lions look like they're the ones that had any life. What happened to the Lions?
Well, first of all, the Bengals trying to send off their coach on a high note. At least that's the presumption. But the Lions over the last half of the season, going into last week, they had thrown the ball, passing yards accounted for 80% of their offense in the previous 6 games. You just can't be that pass-heavy. You've got to be able to run the football. That's why they've kind of benched Amir Abdullah. They're going Tion Green, and they're going with Theo Riddick, but you really need better running backs than that. They've got to get balance on their offense, so this is going to happen to them again.
Heading over to the Rams and Titans game. Titans, another loss. This could be the second straight year they failed down the stretch to make the playoffs. Is it the same problems as last year, or is this a whole nother set of problems this year for the Titans?
They're like the Cowboys in that they're an offensive line-centric team. They need their offensive line to play at an elite level in order to win. Maybe not quite as well like Cowboys, but pretty close. Over the second half of the season, their offensive line went from being an A grade in the first half of the season probably to a B- grade. I'm going to be doing grades for ESPN's entire section next week, but it looks like that's what they're trending towards. That's a team that they can't win with a B- offensive line performance. They've got to do better. So they also have to, by the way, develop other things in their team that can allow them not to have to lean the offensive line so much.
Casey, on the flip side of that game, the Rams, and they've been one of the pleasant surprises the entire NFL season. Sean McVay, Jared Goff, he's done wonders, but I have to wonder, is that offense now running through Todd Gurley? Because he has come on strong after a bad year last year, and especially in the last couple of weeks, he is basically carrying that offense on his back. Does this Rams offense now run through totally Todd Gurley?
I think they realized they had gone at the first half of the season. They ranked first in my offensive line rankings for ESPN's Insider section, which we posted after week 8, I believe it was. So they ranked first then. And for most of the second half of the season, they've taken a step back. They're probably at a B-plus grade, which is still really good, but not quite what they were. And I think they realized we better get back to leaning on this offensive line, and it goes through Gurley. So I think that's what they've concentrated on, is getting back to that. And that's really scary for the rest of the NFC, because now they're back to that previous A level.
Casey, in Kansas City with the Chiefs, not you, but in Kansas City with the Chiefs, the KC Chiefs, another offensive performance by them. The offense seems like it's coming back around again, with Andy Reid handing the play calling duties over to Nagy. And of course, you have now 1,000 yards on the ground for Hunt, 1,000 yards receiving for Hill and Travis Kelce, and then Alex Smith with over 3,000 yards passing. Talk about how this offense has gotten better now with the new play calling.
Yeah, the new play calling is it's helped their run blocking, because the run blocking had been stepping back. At the first few weeks of the season, they did fantastic. Then teams started sitting back and saying, okay, when you do get a run blocking, we're going to make sure that Hunt doesn't get breakaway runs. That changed the balance of the offense. Now they had to lean on their passing game more, and they weren't ready for it. And I think I don't think they want to trust Alex Smith to throw the ball vertically, but they have been of late. They say, okay, well, we have to do this. We've got playmakers in Kelce and Hill. We've got to get some downfield throws, because it's the only thing that's going to make this offense go. So as long as they can keep that vertical game going, they're a dangerous team. But, boy, they're a flawed team in so many ways. I think they're one and done in the playoffs.
Patriots and Bills, it seems like as soon as they took that touchdown off the board with Kelvin Benjamin, which we all know was a catch, but I digress. You know, the Patriots, they just seem to run away with the game. And it seems like so many times this Patriots team, they just take advantage of situations. And you saw the Patriots say, all right, well, you didn't get that one. We're just going to take your heart out now.
I think it's one of those situations where the Bills, you can look through, you can go through a lot of football history and find this happens, that the team just gets in the other team's head. And I think the Bills thought, we can't win this game, and they started trying to make plays they couldn't make, and then when the Benjamin play got taken away, if they win the game thinking you can't win the game, you're going to find a way to not win the game. So I think if the Bills' mindset changes down the road, they could have won a game like this. But the Patriots, by the way, they're very beatable right now. They are not the powerhouse everybody thinks that they are. I think they could lose in the divisional round.
Casey, sticking with that game, though, you have to look at the Bills. If they happen to sneak into the playoffs, do they scare anybody on either side of the ball? I mean, Tyrod Taylor, question mark. He can be good or he can be bad. Kelvin Benjamin seems to be like the only reliable option in the receiving game. LaShawn McCoy can't carry the load 40 times a game. Do the Bills really scare anybody if they happen to sneak into the playoffs?
If they could play formula football, they can, because they've got some really good run blocking of late. That would be, if you're a team that doesn't have a good run defense, you might be a team that's afraid of them, that they could set a pace or play a type of game plan that might be able to dictate paces. But otherwise, no, I think that they are a very limited team. If you've got a good enough run defense, you're going to make them play a game they don't want to play. So I think they'd be the weakest AFC playoff team.
Flipping back over to the NFC, the Saints beat the Falcons at home, get a little revenge for that Thursday night game a couple weeks ago. And in many ways, it was the Saints' defense that won them this game. Remember, the last time the Saints made a playoff run with the Super Bowl, it was the running game and the defense. Same formula this year, Casey.
Well, go look at San Francisco. That's what's wrong with Atlanta's offense. Their play callers over in San Francisco now leading Jimmy Garoppolo to be one of the great quarterbacks in the NFL. And Steve Sarkisian's just a solid play caller, and that's it. And the Saints have more talent. And if the Falcons had Shanahan still as their play caller, they'd probably win that game. But they're just not being able to dictate a kind of an offensive pace they can win that sort of game. And, yeah, the Saints right now, they can run the ball and they can lean into the defense. And Breeze has shown enough this year to know if you have to have him direct and win a game for you, he can do it if he has to. But if he doesn't have to, well, he could play another 5 years.
Chargers win a close game in New York. If the Chargers make the postseason, what kind of threat are they in the AFC?
They're the type of team that they have the ultimate one-and-done type of approach, because Rivers in that offense can be very explosive, but their run blocking has been mediocre doesn't do it justice. It's been terrible. They're near the bottom of the league in good blocking rate, and they have been for most of the season. And their pass blocking is so-so as well, but they've got a powerful front seven. And when you've got that many playmakers, you can find a way to hit a big play or two. So they're a type of team that could pull off a first-round upset in the playoffs.
The Panthers are a team the Eagles could rematch with in the postseason. They get the win. They clinch a playoff spot over the Buccaneers. What kind of Panthers team is this? We saw when they lost the Eagles. They seem to be a little bit of a different team now. How has this team evolved over the last several weeks?
Their run blocking has been the best in the league the past 6 weeks of the season. In fact, remember I measured in 6-week increments. They've been at the top of the past 4 measurements I've done. So this is just a run blocking team a team that's doing run blocking at an elite level, and they can dictate pace because of that. Their front seven's really strong as well. I don't think Newton has played the game breaker that he has been in past years in the passing game, but he's doing great in the running game. So I think it's going to be a situation where if you play Carolina, you better get the lead, because otherwise, if you start letting them dictate pace, they will steamroll you.
Jaguars travel to San Francisco, lose a pretty exciting game overall. It was interesting because each team had different quarters. You saw the 49ers 10-0 in the first quarter, Jaguars 16-6 in the second quarter. 49ers won the third quarter because they were already ahead when the Jaguars scored in the fourth quarter. They just happened to score more points. What is it about Jimmy Garoppolo in Kyle Shanahan's office that makes him so good?
Well, he's had a lot of training under Bill Belichick, and I mentioned there's things that Shanahan does with his play calling, if you get into the really deep dive stuff, that nobody else does. He's calling the types of plays, he's putting plays together in ways that nobody else does. Sooner or later, the league will catch up to him, and they'll start finding ways to defend, or they'll find ways to actually start calling those plays in a similar way. But right now they haven't, and Garoppolo's operating that offense. I figured if he got talent out there, if Shanahan got talent out there, he could have a really good team really quickly, and that's what's happened to them. And the Jaguars, by the way, their run defense is starting to struggle again. I think their secondary is, I don't want to say it's overrated, but it's a ball-hawking secondary, and you can't beat them in coverage and things. So I think that's a team that that could be a really they need emotion, and they need to be they're just a team that I think could struggle in the playoffs.
Casey, just kind of piggybacking off of that, the Jaguars, they've had that great defense for most of the year. I mean, was the game over the weekend against San Francisco just a product of Jimmy Garoppolo playing out of his mind? Or do you really think there actually are some holes now on that defense that are starting to be exposed as they get towards the postseason?
I think they're wearing out. I think they're also a team that has to have momentum on their side. That was what I was looking for a second ago. They need momentum. If they're a team that, if they play with a certain momentum, they can do very well. But they fight amongst each other. They're very, you see what they did last week. They lose their poise, and I think they're a team that if you get in the playoffs and you can get them to play the type of game they don't want to play, if you can goad them into playing the type of game they don't want to play, which I think you can do, you can get them out of position. They're not the most disciplined defense, so I think that they can get in the playoffs. I think it could lose in the divisional round. Wild card round. I think it lose in the first round. I don't even know that they make it to the divisional if they can't get their discipline back in check.
The Seahawks eliminated the Cowboys from playoff contention. Ezekiel Elliott got over 100 yards from scrimmage, but outside of his offensive production, it seems like that offense couldn't do anything versus the Seahawks defense, which we can remind people, they're without a lot of pieces on that defense.
They are, and the Cowboys, missing all those kicks. If they make all those kicks, they win the game probably. And they're just, I think they all thought Zeke comes back, everything's going to be back to normal, back to what it should be. And it's, guys, you still have passing game problems. Your quarterback has not proven that he can pass to win the game. He didn't do that in college, and it was a question mark coming into this season. If you took the running game away, can Dak Prescott win a game for you consistently? And he can't so far. And again, if he can't do that against Seattle's defense on the road, and Seattle's defense is not what it used to be, I shudder to think what happened if he played to, say, the Vikings or something. Maybe he's going to have a really bad game.
Casey, on the flip side of that, Russell Wilson has been carrying the offense, but have they found a sort of a running game? And they've had a rotation of backs all season long, and it seems like Russell Wilson only has one reliable receiver in Doug Baldwin. Are the Seahawks capable on offense of going through the playoffs if they happen to get in after this week?
They need Jimmy Graham to come back. He has, 2 catches over the past 3 weeks. I think he has fewer than 10 yards receiving. He's done absolutely nothing. And they are throwing the ball. It's not like they're not targeting him, so they need him to come back. The run blocking has been better. The Seahawks run block has been terrible all year long. Davis is a good back. There was a time a few years ago when I graded out SEC running backs and found him to be the best running back in the SEC, so he has that type of talent. But I still look at them and go, their defense has holes. Their run blocking is still not that good. It's kind of, they're like the old John Elway Broncos, that either Wilson plays that well and wins the game for them, or they're going to lose. I think again they could get a 1-win in the playoffs, but I can't see them making a Super Bowl run.
Casey, before the Eagles played on Monday night, the Steelers went to Houston and manhandled the Texans. Outside of a spectacular DeAndre Hopkins catch, the Texans offense got nothing done. Is the Steelers win a byproduct of them clicking on all cylinders, or are the Texans just that bad at this point?
Texans are just that bad. Mind you, the Steelers are that good as well. They've got powerful run blocking. They've got a really good defense. If they play discipline, their defense can be superb, and they played discipline yesterday. The Texans, they've lost so many people. They're just not that good. But the Steelers right now, they're motivated, and I think the Steelers right now and as long as they don't look past the division round, they're looking for the rematch against New England with their new linebacker, James Harrison.
And that's your NFL Week 16 recap here on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN with ESPN.com NFL Insider KC Joyner. And Casey, before we let you go, we know a lot of the playoff spots are locked up and ready to go, but there's still little openings. What teams do you think are going to make it? Is it going to be the Falcons or the Seahawks in the NFC, and in the AFC between the Ravens, Bills, Chargers, Titans? Who's going to get in among those bunch?
If I had to guess, I would say it would be the Falcons in the NFC. And if I'm looking at the AFC, I'm thinking it's going to be the Ravens. And I still think the Titans are going to come back, but I could easily see them losing. So I'd probably say the Ravens, and it should be the Titans, but it won't surprise me at all if it's the Chargers. I don't think the Bills make it.
You can follow him on Twitter at KC Joyner TFS for all of your NFL information. Casey, we appreciate you joining today. We'll catch up with you on Friday. Pete will be back in the saddle here, and we'll preview the Eagles versus Cowboys game.
Sounds great. Appreciate it, guys.